You stand in a realm few dare to enter, not the realm of loneliness, but the sacred space where illusions fall away and your true power reveals itself. When everything else fades and you're left with only the universe, what remains is not emptiness, it's clarity, it's force. It is a quiet, cosmic reminder that having nothing else but the universe is not a position of weakness. It is a return to your original state, limitless, sovereign, and aligned with a higher order that responds not to fear, but to pure intention. So if you're here, feeling like you're walking alone, know this: you're not forsaken, you're being positioned. The universe strips away the noise to let you hear the signal. It clears the stage so that your spirit, unfiltered and awake, can emerge with purpose. Not everyone reaches this threshold, but you did, and you're not here by accident. You are being shaped by a silence that speaks louder than any voice. When solitude wraps around you like a heavy cloak, it can feel as though the world has walked out and locked the door behind it. You're left standing in the middle of your life, surrounded not by voices, but by echoes, remnants of people, moments, and promises that faded. Often that loneliness isn't the result of a single dramatic exit. It builds slowly, like fog gathering on a window, blurring what used to be clear. Relationships drift, support systems weaken. Suddenly the crowd you once leaned on disappears, and you're left with nothing but the silence. Yet beneath that silence lies something holy, not abandonment, but an initiation. Many arrive at this place not by choice, but by necessity. It is not always the weak who end up alone with the universe. It is often the strong, the ones who gave too much, carried too many, and finally ran out of space to carry themselves. You might have been the one holding everyone else together. You might have smiled when you wanted to scream. But when you live that way long enough, the universe steps in, not to punish, but to intervene. It clears the room, removes the noise, and says, "Now let's find out who you really are." When all external anchors are cut, what remains is the question you can no longer avoid. Who am I when no one is watching? You ended up here because something in you needed to awaken, not the surface self, the one shaped by approval and responsibility, but the deeper self, the one born for communion with the infinite. That awakening could not happen in comfort. It could not arrive in a room full of affirmation. It needed the void, the stillness, the stripping away. Everything that walked out of your life did so because it no longer had a role in where you're headed. The universe does not waste people, nor does it remove them without cause. Some departures are deliverance in disguise. When the world can no longer reflect your worth, the universe begins to. And though it may hurt, the separation was sacred. The people who misunderstood you, the places where you felt unseen, the moments when your heart was overlooked, none of it happened by accident. Those chapters pushed you here. They nudged you toward the only relationship that cannot fracture, the one between your soul and the source. You are alone not because you are forgotten, but because you are being realigned. Realigned with truth, with clarity, with power that doesn't come from presence in a room, but presence in your being. Loneliness, in its purest form, is a mirror. It shows you where you've been leaking your light. Maybe you gave too much of yourself to people who didn't know what to do with you. Maybe you molded your identity around being needed. Maybe your strength was mistaken for invincibility. Whatever the reason, the universe allowed this unraveling not to break you, but to bring you back to your essence. And now, in this sacred quiet, you see it. You see that being left behind was actually being called forward. So you're here, not surrounded, not applauded, not praised, but seen, truly seen by the one force that never needed a stage to recognize your worth. And now, with no one else around to define you, you begin to remember. You remember that solitude isn't emptiness, it's exposure. Exposure to who you really are. You didn't end up alone with the universe by mistake. You were led here. And now that you're here, the real journey begins. From the stillness that once felt suffocating, but now pulses with sacred clarity, something deeper begins to emerge. Solitude does more than quiet the noise. It stirs the flame. Not a consuming fire of destruction, but a refining fire of transformation. In the wake of silence comes heat, and that heat reveals what silence alone could not. The parts of you that still cling, resist, and need to be released. The universe, having met you in stillness, now begins its deeper work, not to punish, but to purify. Refinement is not a gentle process. It is fire meeting metal, and like ore placed into a furnace, your soul enters into a state where everything untrue is burned away. It isn't the kind of suffering that leaves you bitter. It's the kind that leaves you clean. Roles begin to dissolve, attachments melt. The identity that once depended on what others said or what you achieved starts to lose its grip. What's left behind isn't hollow, it's holy. You don't lose yourself in the fire. You find the version of yourself that was always there, buried beneath layers of survival. There is a kind of pain that teaches more than comfort ever could. It is the pain of shedding, of watching what no longer serves you fall away, not because you forced it, but because it can no longer withstand the heat of truth. The universe is not cruel in this process. It is precise. Every hardship is measured. Every flame is intentional. You are not being broken. You are being clarified. What falls apart is not your life, but your illusion of control. And in its place rises a steadiness that no applause, no status, no external achievement could ever produce. Those who misunderstand the fire try to escape it. They run back to noise, back to distraction, back to dependency. But those who stay, who endure the burning, exit transformed. They carry a weight, not of burden, but of substance. There is something unmistakable about a person who has been through the fire and did not flinch. They speak differently. They walk differently. Not louder, but deeper. Because when the unnecessary burns away, what's left speaks for itself. Even the scars become sacred. They no longer symbolize failure or punishment. They become symbols of passage, proof that something was endured and overcome. The soul does not emerge untouched. It emerges awakened. The false has died so that the real can breathe. And in the ash of what once was, a foundation is laid for what can finally begin. You didn't survive just to survive. You endured to embody something eternal. The fire did not consume you. It commissioned you. So if the heat still lingers, let it. If the shedding still stings, endure it. Because you are not being erased, you are being revealed. The universe is crafting not just a new chapter, but a new container capable of holding more power, more clarity, more purpose. And that container can only be formed in the fire. What the fire leaves behind is not just resilience, it is readiness. After refinement, there comes a choice. Grasp at what remains, or surrender to what's becoming. The soul, no longer distracted or disguised, is faced with the truth that real power begins where control ends. Having walked through the fire, there's nothing left to prove. Now comes the deeper transformation, one that doesn't blaze but flows. And that flow begins with surrender. Surrender isn't defeat, it's alignment. It's the posture of a soul that no longer needs to wrestle with life to feel worthy. You don't have to force what's already yours. You don't have to cling to outcomes shaped by fear. When the ego steps aside, grace steps in. The universe never demanded perfection. It called for openness. And in surrender, that call is answered, not with striving, but with stillness that trusts. There's a paradox in this kind of strength. The world equates power with dominance, with pushing through, with winning. But the universe defines power differently. Power, in its highest form, is presence. It's the ability to stand empty of resistance and full of faith. When you no longer fear the unknown becomes your ally. You move not by force, but by flow. You stop fighting the river and let it carry you, because now you know it was never trying to drown you. It was trying to teach you how to breathe. Every time you unclench your grip on how it should go, you make room for something greater than your logic to take the lead. This is not laziness, it's sacred intelligence. It's trust refined by fire. There is immense strength in letting go, not passively, but consciously. To release the burden of self-sufficiency is not to collapse. It is to finally lean into the current of something far more expansive. That current does not drag, it uplifts, it does not confuse, it aligns. In surrender, your soul becomes light again, not light as in insignificant, but light as in unburdened. You begin to move with the rhythm of what is true, instead of the resistance of what was safe. And that movement carries you toward places your striving never could. Because when you stop demanding certainty, you start receiving clarity. And clarity doesn't come from having all the answers. It comes from being rooted enough to live without needing them. As surrender becomes your new foundation, something even more profound begins to take form: grace. It doesn't enter loudly, nor does it announce its arrival. It seeps through the cracks left by the fire, fills the spaces exposed by surrender, and moves with the quiet authority of something eternal. Grace doesn't wait for perfection. It arrives precisely because of imperfection. It finds the broken edges, not to smooth them over, but to inhabit them with presence. Where resistance once occupied the soul, grace now takes residence. It holds what you thought would shatter. It sustains what you believed was too weak to endure. And it does not shame you for the collapse. It honors you for standing up again. This force is not abstract sentiment. It's active, alive, and endlessly generous. You don't earn it. You don't perform for it. You simply stop resisting it. And in that stillness, grace does its quiet, transforming work. There is something sacred about being seen in your weakness and met not with judgment, but with strength. Grace is that response. When all your strategies fall short, when your willpower fades, when the words finally stop, grace speaks. And it doesn't say, "Get better." It says, "I'm here." Not after you've healed, but while you're still bleeding. Not once you're back on your feet, but while you're still crawling. Its power isn't found in avoidance, but in proximity. It steps into the mess, sits with the sorrow, and still calls you worthy. The cracks in your life, the failures, the rejections, the griefs, they become entry points, not for despair, but for divine architecture. Grace fills the gaps not by covering them up, but by making them shine. What once embarrassed you becomes the place others feel seen. What once made you hide now becomes your witness. There's nothing more powerful than a soul who has been cracked open and filled with something greater than themselves. That soul doesn't need to prove anything. It simply radiates. So don't curse the cracks. Don't rush to seal them. Let them stay open long enough for grace to move in. Because where effort ends, grace begins. And where grace begins, healing is no longer temporary, it's transformational. You're no longer patching your life together with willpower. You're becoming a vessel that holds light, not despite your brokenness, but because of it. Where grace settles, structure begins. The cracks once filled with sorrow now serve as blueprints for something more enduring. You are not just healing, you are being rebuilt from the inside out. Slowly, steadily, the invisible scaffolding of your soul is reinforced with lessons born of pain, silence, surrender, and grace. What was once a place of emptiness now becomes a site of sacred construction. No rush, no shortcuts. The universe builds in rhythms, not in haste. This hidden process unfolds quietly, unnoticed by the world. There are no headlines for becoming, no applause for the foundation work. But just as the roots of a tree dig deeper in stillness before the branches reach for the sky, so too does your spirit anchor in the unseen. And that anchoring, though invisible to others, makes all visible growth possible. You are not being delayed. You are being deepened. You are not falling behind. You are being positioned to rise in a way that cannot be undone. The universe does not construct identity with convenience in mind. It designs with eternity in view. Each internal shift, each release of ego, each moment of faith in silence, each act of surrender becomes a pillar, a load-bearing beam for the version of you that can carry more weight, more truth, more responsibility without crumbling. Those silent nights of questioning are not wasted. They're etched into the framework of who you are becoming, and nothing built in the dark can be taken by the light. Patience is the mortar of this architecture, not passive waiting, but patient becoming. You begin to realize that absence is not void, but space. Space where the sacred is shaped. You are not meant to be fast-tracked to clarity. You are meant to be formed into someone who can steward it. The universe knows the strength required for what lies ahead, and it is building you to hold it, not just taste it, not just touch it, but to live in it fully. That kind of capacity isn't taught, it's chiseled. There's a dignity in becoming that no one sees. Like a mountain, forming under centuries of pressure, you are being shaped by forces ancient and precise. You don't need to understand every detail to trust the hands doing the shaping. The time spent underground, away from the spotlight, is not the pause in your story. It is the foundation. And when foundations are deep, they can hold structures taller than anyone thought possible. The unseen seasons are not detours. They are destiny taking root. Eventually, the outer world will catch up with the inner reality. What you've cultivated in secret will echo in public. But the echo won't be noise, it will be substance. You'll walk into spaces not trying to prove your worth, but radiating what was built in silence. And no one will fully understand what happened in those quiet years. They're not meant to. What matters is that you carry it now, this unshakable architecture of selfhood designed by the universe, not in the rush of ambition, but in the reverence of becoming. When the structure is set and the foundation firm, what has been built in silence begins to rise. Not as spectacle, not for approval, but as inevitability. All that was cultivated in secret starts to speak through presence. There's no announcement, no parade. You enter rooms differently, not because you are louder, but because you carry weight. Not the weight of burden, but of substance. What you carry cannot be shaken, because it wasn't built on visibility. It was forged in the unseen. There's a quiet confidence that settles into your bones. It doesn't seek recognition. It doesn't demand to be heard. It simply is. You become the embodiment of all the truths you once had to repeat just to believe. Now they live in you. You don't preach peace, you emit it. You don't chase purpose, you are it. Every scar, every silent night, every surrendered moment has shaped a presence that cannot be duplicated because it wasn't learned. It was lived. People begin to take notice, not because you're seeking validation, but because presence always announces itself without speaking. You may be asked, how did you get here? But there's no formula to explain. There's no step-by-step to replicate. All you can say is, I had no one but the universe, and that was enough. And those words, simple as they seem, carry the weight of 1,000 quiet victories. Each one, a stone laid into the foundation of who you are now. You no longer move to prove, you move to serve. The ego that once needed applause has been replaced by a vision rooted in alignment. You don't need to be the loudest voice in the room. Your presence has already spoken. And when storms arise again, as they always do, you don't panic. You've been through worse. You've been refined by fire, held by grace, and shaped in silence. What frightens others now calms you, because you know the source and you trust the process. Authority, real authority, comes from endurance. From choosing to stay when walking away was easier, from leaning in when everything inside wanted to escape. What you carry is not charisma, it's character. It's integrity built brick by brick in solitude. It's wisdom born from wrestling, not from reading. And the strength you embody is not loud, but it is unmissable. It doesn't need to demand attention. It naturally commands respect. And now, you are prepared, not just for elevation, but for impact. You've been hollowed out so you could be filled with something real. Not imitation light, but the kind that survives the dark. You are no longer just surviving. You are anchoring others who feel like they might not make it. You don't need to fix them. Your presence tells them it's possible, that healing is possible. that becoming is possible, and most of all, that walking with nothing but the universe is not the end. It is the beginning of everything.